What happens when an entitled duchess meets an uncompromising talk show host? You're about to witness one of the most explosive television moments ever recorded. Before we dive in, make sure to hit that subscribe button and let me know in the comments what you think really triggered this entire meltdown. The studio lights were blazing hot as Meghan Markle settled into the guest chair across from Whoopi Goldberg on The View. She had arrived 20 minutes late, citing traffic, though. Her security detail had been spotted at a high-end boutique just blocks away. The audience was buzzing with anticipation, expecting the usual softball questions about her latest philanthropic endeavors. Whoopi, however, had different plans. "So Meghan," Whoopi began, her voice carrying that familiar gravitas. "Let's talk about your recent comments regarding the royal family's lack of support during your mental health struggles. But I'm curious, how do you reconcile those statements with the fact that you had access to the best private healthcare in the world?" Meghan's perfectly practiced smile faltered for just a microsecond. "Well, Whoopi, I think you're misunderstanding the complexity of the situation. When you're trapped in an institution that values protocol over people, having access to healthcare doesn't matter if you're being actively discouraged from using it." "Trapped?" Whoopi raised an eyebrow. "That's a strong word for someone who married into one of the wealthiest families on earth. Help me understand how someone gets trapped in luxury." The audience stirred slightly, sensing the shift in tone. Meghan's hands tightened almost imperceptibly on her designer clutch. "Whoopi, with all due respect, you're oversimplifying something incredibly nuanced. The golden cage is still a cage. Just because something looks glamorous from the outside doesn't mean the person living it isn't suffering." "I hear you," Whoopi nodded slowly. "But let's be real here. Millions of people suffer without private jets, without staff to handle their every need, without the platform you had to speak out. What makes your suffering more valid than theirs?" Meghan's jaw clenched. "I never said my suffering was more valid than anyone else's. But I won't apologize for speaking my truth just because I happen to have privilege. That's exactly the kind of thinking that keeps people silent." "Speaking your truth," Whoopi repeated, leaning forward. "That's become quite the catchphrase, hasn't it? But what happens when your truth conflicts with everyone else's truth? The palace staff, the royal correspondents, even some of your own family members have different versions of events." "Those people weren't living my experience," Meghan shot back, her voice rising slightly. "They weren't the ones being scrutinized, criticized, and vilified by the British press every single day. They weren't the ones having their mental health dismissed by the very institution that was supposed to protect them. But they were there," Whoopi pressed. "They witnessed interactions, they were part of meetings, they saw day-to-day dynamics." "Are you saying all of these people are lying?" Meghan paused, clearly calculating her response. "I'm saying that people see what they want to see, especially when it serves their interests to maintain the status quo. The palace has a very sophisticated PR machine, Whoopi. They're experts at controlling narratives. So is Hollywood." Whoopi fired back without missing a beat. "And you came from that world. You understand PR and narrative control better than most. Isn't it possible that you're using those same tactics now?" The studio fell silent except for the hum of cameras. Meghan's composure began to crack around the edges. "I can't believe you're actually questioning my integrity right now," she said, her voice tight with controlled anger. "I came here expecting to have an honest conversation about important issues, not to be ambushed with conspiracy theories." "Ambushed?" Whoopi's eyebrows shot up. "Meghan, these are questions that millions of people are asking. If you can't handle them in a controlled environment like this, how did you expect to handle them as a working royal?" "How I expected to handle them?" Meghan's voice cracked with incredulity. "Whoopi, I was 19 when I started acting. I've been handling public scrutiny longer than most people. But there's a difference between professional criticism and systematic racism disguised as journalism." "Now we're getting somewhere," Whoopi said, settling back in her chair. "Let's talk about the racism angle, because that's been central to your narrative. But I'm curious about something. You've spoken extensively about the lack of support you received, but what specific support did you ask for that was denied?" Meghan blinked, clearly not expecting such a direct question. Well, there were conversations, private conversations, that I had with senior family members about needing help, about needing protection from the press." "But what kind of help specifically?" Whoopi wasn't letting up. "More security? Different living arrangements? Media training? What exactly did you request?" It's not that simple, Whoopi. You don't just walk up to the queen and demand things. There are protocols, hierarchies. Everything has to go through proper channels. So, you went through the proper channels. I tried to, but, Meghan fumbled. The system isn't designed to be responsive to individual needs. It's designed to protect the institution first. Okay, but you had Harry, Whoopi pointed out. He understood the system. He had relationships with key people. What did he do to advocate for you within those channels? Meghan's face flushed slightly. Harry did everything he could, but even he was limited by the constraints of the institution. There's only so much a spare heir can do when the establishment has already made up its mind about someone. A spare heir, Whoopi repeated thoughtfully. That's an interesting way to describe your husband. But he wasn't powerless, was he? He had resources, connections, influence. He certainly used that influence effectively when it came to your wedding, your living arrangements, your public engagements. Those were different circumstances, Meghan said defensively. Planning a wedding or scheduling appearances is not the same as getting institutional support for mental health struggles or protection from media harassment. But it shows the system could be responsive when it wanted to be, Whoopi countered. Which brings me back to my original question. What specific support did you ask for and get denied? The tension in the studio was palpable now. Meghan shifted, uncomfortably in her chair, her media training warring with her obvious frustration. Whoopi, I think you're trying to reduce a complex situation to a simple transaction, and that's not how institutional racism works. It's not about specific requests being denied. It's about a culture that made it clear from day one that I didn't belong. Made it clear how? Whoopi pressed relentlessly. Through actions, through words, through policies? I need specifics, Meghan. Because vague feelings aren't evidence of institutional racism. Meghan's eyes flashed dangerously. Vague feelings? Are you seriously going to sit there and tell me that what I experienced wasn't real because I can't provide you with a neat little list of documented incidents? I'm not saying it wasn't real, Whoopi clarified, her voice steady. I'm saying that if you're going to make serious accusations about institutional racism, people have a right to understand what that looked like in practice. People have a right. Meghan's voice rose another octave. What about my right to be believed when I say I was mistreated? What about my right to not have my trauma dissected for public entertainment? Your right to be believed? Whoopi's voice carried a hint of steel now. Meghan, belief isn't something you're entitled to just because you're claiming victimhood. Belief is earned through consistency, through evidence, through accountability. And frankly, your story has had more holes than Swiss cheese. Meghan's mouth dropped open in shock. Excuse me? Are you actually comparing my lived experience to Swiss cheese on national television? I'm comparing your narrative to Swiss cheese, Whoopi clarified without backing down. Because every time someone asks for specifics, you deflect. Every time someone points out inconsistencies, you claim you're being attacked. That's not how truth works, Meghan. Inconsistencies. Meghan's voice was getting shrill now. What inconsistencies? I've been nothing but transparent about my experience. Really? Whoopi leaned forward, her expression skeptical. Because in your interview with Oprah, you said you were naive about what joining the royal family would entail. But you're an intelligent woman who had access to Google, to history books, to advisors. Are you really going to sit here and tell me you did zero research before marrying into the most scrutinized family on earth? Meghan's face flushed deeper. Of course I did research, but research and reality are two different things. You can't research what it feels like to be isolated, to be treated as an outsider. But you can research what happened to other women who married into that family, Whoopi shot back. Diana's story wasn't exactly a secret. Sarah Ferguson's struggles were well documented. You knew the risks going in, but you made the choice anyway. So why should we feel sorry for you when you got exactly what you signed up for? I didn't sign up to be racially abused by the British press, Meghan snapped. I didn't sign up to have my unborn child's skin color questioned by family members. And there it is, Whoopi said, sitting back with a knowing look. The race card, right on schedule. The audience gasped audibly. Meghan looked as if she'd been slapped. The race card, she repeated, her voice barely controlled. Did you just say I'm playing the race card by discussing actual racism? I'm saying you use racism as a shield whenever the conversation gets uncomfortable, Whoopi replied evenly. It's become your go-to response for any criticism, any questioning, any accountability. That's not addressing racism, Meghan. That's weaponizing it. I cannot believe, Meghan began, her hands trembling slightly, that you, a black woman, are sitting here telling me that I'm weaponizing racism. Do you have any idea how damaging that is? Do you have any idea how damaging it is when someone cries racism every time they face legitimate criticism? Whoopi fired back. You're making it harder for people who are actually experiencing systemic racism to be taken seriously. You're turning real discrimination into a punchline. Legitimate criticism. Meghan's voice cracked with outrage. Whoopi, they called my child a monkey in the British press. They compared me to a gorilla. They questioned whether my children would be too dark to be royal. How is any of that legitimate criticism? And that was wrong, Whoopi acknowledged. Those specific instances were absolutely racist and inexcusable. But that doesn't mean every negative story about you was racist. It doesn't mean every criticism of your behavior was racist. You seem incapable of distinguishing between the two. I'm perfectly capable of distinguishing, Meghan shot back. But when you're constantly under attack, when every single thing you do is scrutinized and criticized, it becomes part of a pattern. You can't separate the racist attacks from the general hostility because they're all part of the same system. Or maybe, Whoopi suggested, her tone cutting, some of the criticism was actually valid, and you're using the racist attacks to dismiss all of it wholesale. Maybe some people genuinely had concerns about your behavior, your attitude, your approach to royal duties. My attitude. Meghan's voice rose dangerously. What exactly was wrong with my attitude, Whoopi? That I wanted to modernize an outdated institution? That I wanted to use my platform to help people? That I refused to be seen and not heard like some Victorian wife? Your attitude, Whoopi said slowly, is that you think you're above criticism. Your attitude is that anyone who disagrees with you is automatically wrong, racist, or jealous. Your attitude is that the entire world should reshape itself around your comfort level. That's not true, Meghan protested, but her voice lacked conviction. Isn't it? Whoopi pressed. You wanted to be a working royal, but only on your terms. You wanted the prestige and platform, but not the restrictions. You wanted the protection and privileges, but not the responsibilities. And when people called you out on that, you claimed persecution. I never said I wanted it only on my terms, Meghan said defensively. I said I wanted to contribute meaningfully, to make a difference. But every time I tried to do something innovative or impactful, I was shut down. Shut down how? Whoopi demanded. Give me one specific example of an innovative idea you had that was rejected for no good reason. Meghan paused, clearly struggling. There were multiple occasions where I proposed initiatives that could have really helped people, but the palace was more concerned with maintaining traditions than actually making a difference. That's not an example. That's a generalization, Whoopi pointed out. I asked for one specific initiative. Just one. What did you propose? When did you propose it? And what reason were you given for the rejection? Meghan stammered. I don't think it's appropriate to discuss internal palace communications in detail. Convenient, Whoopi said dryly. So you can make vague accusations about being shut down, but you can't provide specifics because of privacy concerns. How exactly are we supposed to evaluate your claims? You're supposed to trust me, Meghan said, her voice tight with frustration. You're supposed to believe that I'm telling the truth about my own experience. Trust is earned, Meghan, Whoopi replied firmly. And you haven't earned it. You've contradicted yourself, avoided specifics, and blamed everyone but yourself for your problems. Why should anyone trust you? Because I have nothing to gain by lying, Meghan shot back. Do you think I enjoy being constantly criticized and questioned? Do you think I wanted my life to become a public spectacle? Actually, yes, Whoopi said without hesitation. I think you love being the center of attention. I think you're addicted to being the victim because it makes you feel important and gives you power over the narrative. And I think you're furious that it's not working as well as you hoped. The studio fell dead silent. Meghan sat frozen, her face cycling through shock, rage, and something that looked almost like panic. How dare you? She whispered, her voice barely audible. How dare you psychoanalyze me on national television? You don't know me. You don't know what I've been through. I know what you've chosen to tell the world, Whoopi replied calmly. And based on that, I know enough to see through the performance. This wounded victim act might work on Oprah, but it doesn't work on me. Performance? Meghan's voice cracked completely now. You think my trauma is a performance? You think my pain is fake? I think your pain is real, Whoopi said, her tone softening slightly. But I think it's mostly self-inflicted. I think you created most of your own problems through your own choices and your own actions. And instead of taking responsibility, you've decided to blame everyone else. Meghan stood up abruptly, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. I don't have to sit here and listen to this character assassination. Sit down, Meghan, Whoopi said firmly. We're not done yet. Yes, we are, Meghan replied, her voice shaking with fury. I came here expecting a respectful interview, not to be ambushed by someone who's clearly already made up her mind about me. I made up my mind based on your own words and actions, Whoopi shot back. If you don't like what that reveals about you, maybe you should look in the mirror instead of blaming me. Look in the mirror? Meghan's voice was trembling with rage now. You want me to look in the mirror? Maybe you should look in yours, Whoopi. Here you are, tearing down another woman, doing the work of the very system that oppressed both of us. They're probably celebrating in Buckingham Palace right now, watching you do their dirty work for free. Whoopi's expression hardened. Don't you dare try to make this about sisterhood now. You can't spend 2 years throwing everyone under the bus and then suddenly want solidarity when someone holds you accountable. That's not how this works. I never threw anyone under the bus, Meghan protested, but her voice was getting more desperate. I spoke my truth about my experiences. If that made some people uncomfortable, that's their problem, not mine. Your truth, Whoopi repeated mockingly. There you go again with that phrase. Let me tell you something about truth, Meghan. Truth doesn't change based on who's asking the questions. Truth doesn't require constant clarification and damage control. Truth stands up to scrutiny. And my truth does stand up to scrutiny, Meghan shot back, her hands gesturing wildly now. Just because you refuse to accept it doesn't mean it's not valid. Then prove it, Whoopi challenged, leaning forward intensely. Right here, right now? Give me one verifiable fact that supports your claims of institutional racism within the royal family. Not a feeling, not an interpretation, not a vague recollection. One concrete, verifiable fact. Meghan opened her mouth, then closed it, her face flushing deeper. That's not. You're trying to trap me into revealing private conversations. I'm trying to get you to support your public accusations with actual evidence. Whoopi fired back. You've made serious claims about racism and mistreatment. You've damaged reputations and relationships. The least you can do is provide some proof. The proof is in how I was treated, Meghan said, her voice rising to near shouting levels. The proof is in the different standards I was held to. The proof is in the way the press covered me versus how they covered Kate. Different standards? Whoopi's eyebrows shot up. Meghan, Kate was criticized for years before her wedding. They called her Weighty Katie, questioned her family's social climbing, scrutinized every outfit. The difference is she didn't run crying to Oprah about it. That's completely different, and you know it, Meghan snapped. Kate was never subjected to racist attacks about her children. Kate was never portrayed as a destructive outsider trying to tear down the monarchy. Maybe because Kate understood her role, Whoopi suggested pointedly. Maybe because Kate respected the institution she married into instead of trying to revolutionize it 5 minutes after arriving. So I should have just stayed silent. Meghan's voice cracked with incredulity. I should have accepted being treated as a second-class citizen in my own family. You should have understood what you were signing up for, Whoopi replied bluntly. You should have done your homework, asked the right questions, and made an informed decision. Instead, you went in blind, got overwhelmed, and decided everyone else was the problem. I wasn't blind, Meghan protested weakly. I knew it would be challenging, but I believed that love would be enough to overcome the obstacles. Love? Whoopi laughed harshly. Meghan, this was never about love. This was about ambition. You saw an opportunity to become one of the most famous women in the world, and you took it. When the reality didn't match your Hollywood fantasy, you threw a tantrum. How dare you diminish my relationship with my husband? Meghan said, her voice shaking with fury. Harry and I have a real marriage, a real partnership built on genuine love and mutual respect. Then why did you throw his family under the bus on international television? Whoopi shot back. Why did you humiliate him by airing private family business to the world? If you really loved and respected him, you would have handled your problems. Privately. We try to handle things privately, Meghan insisted. We spent years trying to work within the system, trying to find compromises. But when that didn't work, when we were being destroyed by the press and abandoned by the family, we had to speak out. Destroyed by the press. Whoopi's voice dripped with skepticism. Meghan, you were one of the most photographed, most talked about women on earth. Every designer wanted to dress you. Every charity wanted your patronage. Every media outlet wanted access to you. That's not destruction, that's fame. Fame built on lies and hatred. Meghan shot back. Every story was negative. Every headline was designed to tear me down. They turned me into a villain before I even had a chance to prove myself. Or maybe, Whoopi suggested, her voice cutting through Meghan's protests. You proved yourself exactly as they suspected you would. Maybe your behavior confirmed their worst assumptions about you. My behavior. Meghan was practically screaming now. What behavior? Trying to modernize outdated protocols? Wanting to connect with people on a human level? Refusing to be a silent, decorative wife? Your behavior of thinking you knew better than everyone else. Whoopi replied calmly. The contrast with Meghan's hysteria, making her appear even more unhinged. Your behavior of dismissing centuries of tradition as outdated, simply because it inconvenienced you. Your behavior of treating staff like servants and family members like obstacles. I never treated anyone poorly, Meghan protested, but her voice lacked conviction. Those stories about bullying staff were completely fabricated by people trying to discredit me. Multiple staff members, Meghan, Whoopi pointed out relentlessly. People who had worked for the royal family for years without complaint. People who had nothing to gain by lying about you. But sure, they all conspired against you for no reason. They conspired against me because I represented change, Meghan said desperately. Because I threatened their comfortable little world, where everything stays the same forever. You represented chaos, Whoopi corrected sharply. You represented someone who thought she could waltz into a 1,000-year-old institution and remake it according to her personal preferences. That's not change, Meghan. That's narcissism. The word hung in the air like a slap. Meghan stood frozen, her mouth opening and closing soundlessly. Narcissism, she finally whispered, her voice barely audible. Did you just call me a narcissist? On national television. If the shoe fits, Whoopi replied without flinching. Everything has to be about you. Everything has to revolve around your feelings, your comfort, your vision. You can't handle criticism, you can't accept responsibility, and you can't imagine that anyone else's perspective might be valid. That's not true, Meghan said. But her voice was breaking completely now. That's not who I am. I'm someone who stands up for what's right, who fights for justice, who refuses to be silenced. You're someone who uses noble causes as cover for selfish behavior, Whoopi replied ruthlessly. You wrap your personal grievances in the language of social justice to make them seem more important than they are. I can't, Meghan said, backing away from the interview setup, her hands shaking visibly. I can't do this anymore. This isn't journalism. This is a character assassination disguised as an interview. This is accountability disguised as an interview, Whoopi corrected. Something you've managed to avoid for 2 years. No, Meghan said, her voice rising to a near shriek. This is a setup. This is exactly the kind of hostile treatment that drove me out of the UK in the first place. You've ambushed me, attacked me, and tried to destroy my reputation on national television. I've asked you questions, Whoopi said simply. If that feels like an attack, maybe you should examine why. Questions? Meghan laughed hysterically. Those weren't questions, those were accusations. You came into this interview with an agenda, with a predetermined narrative, and nothing I could have said would have changed your mind. Try me, Whoopi. Challenged. Give me one honest answer. Take responsibility for one mistake. Show me you're capable of genuine self-reflection. Meghan stared at her for a long moment, her chest heaving with emotion. When she spoke, her voice was cold and final. I don't owe you anything, Whoopi. I don't owe you explanations, I don't owe you accountability, and I don't owe you my dignity. I came here as a courtesy, and you've turned it into a circus. You turned it into a circus the moment you walked in here, thinking you were above being questioned. Whoopi shot back. This is what real interviews look like, Meghan. This is what happens when someone doesn't hand you a script and let you control the narrative. I'm done, Meghan said, grabbing her purse and standing up abruptly. I'm absolutely done with this assassination masquerading as journalism. Running away again. Whoopi called after her as she headed toward the exit. Just like you ran from the royal family when things got difficult. Meghan stopped dead in her tracks, her shoulders rigid with fury. For a moment, it looked like she might turn around and continue the fight. Instead, she spoke without looking back, her voice carrying clearly across the silent studio. History will vindicate me, Whoopi. And when it does, I hope you remember this moment and feel ashamed of how you treated someone who was only trying to tell their truth. History is written by people who can back up their claims with facts, Whoopi replied to her retreating figure. Good luck with that. The studio door slammed shut with a resounding crash that seemed to echo through the stunned silence. Whoopi turned back to the camera, her expression calm and professional despite the chaos that had just unfolded. And that, folks, is why preparation matters in journalism, she said with a slight smile. Some people are used to softball questions and scripted conversations. When they encounter actual accountability, they can't handle it. The cameras kept rolling as the audience sat in shocked silence, processing what they had just witnessed. In the hallway outside, the sound of raised voices and slamming doors could be heard as Meghan's entourage scrambled to manage the fallout from what would undoubtedly become one of the most talked about interview disasters in television history. What did you think of this explosive confrontation? Did Whoopi go too far, or was this exactly the kind of tough questioning that Meghan needed to face? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more breaking down the biggest moments in celebrity culture.